Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Traveling Through Space. And today I'm excited to welcome Mark Johnston, AZ Astro Guy on social media, and you are a NASA Solar System Ambassador based in Arizona. So welcome to this episode.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, and you are heavily involved in public outreach. As you said, you did around 127 events last year, which is amazing. Um,
Mhm.
and you've been interested in astronomy for a while, as you say, from your mother's womb, and we'll definitely get into some of that inspiration and motivation, and how you go about sharing that love of the universe with everybody else. Um,
Okay.
and you started doing public outreach, since the '90s. So you've been involved in this space for a while. Um, and that's definitely a fascinating journey. So did I miss anything in that highlight that people should know about you?
Well, yeah, as I say, I started doing public outreach early 1990s, and that was traditionally as people do it with the telescope, and people, line up and look in the eyepiece, and you can show them planets and the moon and maybe some of the brighter deep space objects. And it wasn't really until COVID happened that actually had a significant impact. So, COVID obviously changed everything for everybody. And one of the things it meant was we couldn't do traditional star parties in the evening because people had to be physically separated from each other. And I was
Right.
aware of a new technology where you put a camera to replace the eyepiece in your telescope, and then the camera
Mhm.
sends information to a laptop, which then can send to a PC screen or a monitor. And so people can stand back in separate little clusters away from each other, and they can all look at the television and see the object that the telescope is looking at. So it allowed me to maintain doing public outreach even during COVID, which was great, and without worrying about people being adjacent to each other. And I also found that there were a lot of advantages in addition to the physical separation, that having the camera allowed you suddenly to see things in color and you could see more detail. You would see spiral arms and galaxies, whereas before in the telescope, you'd see a little smudge at the core. That's all you would see. See
Right.
far more detail in nebula and globular clusters and, of course, the moon and so on. So it really gives you a much better view of the night sky, as well as uh, being a big advantage for people who are disabled. For example, if you're the elderly or they're very young, they don't really know how to look in the telescope without their glasses or whatever. But everyone can look at a TV screen easily, so it's a lot easier for some folks to participate. And it became kind of the go-to way. I can still do both ways, obviously, but pretty much always doing this electronic astronomy method now, and it works very well.
That's awesome. Um, and your handle, the AZ Astro Guy, is first of all, it's an awesome name. You're clearly putting out that you're from Arizona, and you are in one of the ones who are interested in astronomy. But I think the social media algorithms have also found you. So you're prioritized when anybody searches for space, and it's very easy to find your work. So congrats on building that brand, which, as you're saying, that it has evolved during the COVID years.
It's funny. Yeah, thank you for that. Um, I originally came up with the name AZ Astro Guy, as you said, for Arizona Astro Guy, but it's funny how many people think it means A to Z Astro Guy, like everything
Oh,
from A to Z.
right.
So I guess it's got a unintended dual meaning.
That's awesome.
But yeah, so I found that social media was a way for me to extend my ability to, my mission basically is to educate and inspire the next generation of scientists and engineers, and also educate the public on their place in the cosmos and try to instill a sense of, beauty and wonder and curiosity about the night sky. And social media allows me to put photographs I've taken with my telescopes or some of my public events up there. And I find that people find it quite interesting to see the night sky in perhaps ways they haven't seen it before. And I try to interact with people when they have questions and respond rapidly and answer questions that may be simple for anyone in astronomy, but for the layperson, it's all new. And that's worked out
Right.
very well for me. I've got about 65,000 followers in different platforms.
Yeah, that's definitely significant. and a lot of interaction, a lot of reshare. So I'm sure like the reach, the actual reach is significant there as well. So
Mhm.
that's definitely awesome. So I thought we have a lot of topics to cover, but I thought we'll start with the easy one, which is what inspires you. And it definitely can be different for everybody when they look up. But if you have few words to on the feeling that you have when you're looking up.
Well, I guess I have to distinguish between when I'm doing an outreach event or when I'm on my own. So in an
Yeah,
outreach event, um, as I said before, I want to educate the public and I want to instill a sense of curiosity and wonder and show what's happening right above their eyes. They don't even know is up there. And people are amazed at the beauty of the galaxies and nebulas. And when I explain how small our position is in the universe compared to what they might think on the Earth. You know, the Earth is basically trivial in the big picture when you look at the number of stars
right.
in the Milky Way and the number of galaxies like the Milky Way, which are basically insignificant out there. And then when I'm on my own, I try to get out to a dark site, and in fact, I'd encourage anyone who's at all interested in this topic to make an effort on a night when there's no moon in the sky to get away from the city and drive for an hour or so and get out to a park or somewhere in the desert or the forest or mountain where you've got no city lights and no other bright lights around, and just take a look up at the sky. And if you had never had that experience before, it's really well worth the trip. It's a spectacular, awe-inspiring view to see the Milky Way above you and the hundreds of millions of stars in the sky. It's quite wonderful. So just that whole feeling still hasn't escaped me. I'm still, after doing it thousands of times, I still love the view of the dark light night sky, and then of course I try to capture that. And it's always a learning experience. I've been doing astrophotography for several years, but there's still more and more to learn, and which I really enjoy. It's good mental exercise to get better at taking the pictures and to get better at processing the pictures so you can provide, the best image that your equipment can capture.
Yeah, yeah, that's definitely true. And technology keeps evolving. It keeps getting better and getting
Yeah, for sure.
miniaturized as well in some ways to come into our
Yeah.
hands. That's awesome. Um, Another easy one. Any of any perspective that has changed for you when you looked up? Anything that's changed in your personal life and views?
I think that because of my understanding of our position in the galaxy and the universe, I'm not as bothered by the small things anymore on Earth. So if somebody cuts me off in traffic, rather than being upset about it, it's much more fleeting for me now because I think about where we are in the big, one little planet and one of 8 planets circling a regular star. There's 400 billion stars and there's 2 trillion galaxies, and I'm only occupying a 90 or 100 year slice in a 18 billion year old universe. I mean, my position in space and time is so minuscule as to be almost incalculable. And small things like that, when I put them in the broader perspective, don't bother me the way they used to. I think it's been a stress reliever in some sense, but uh, I don't think that otherwise. I think obviously I really enjoy it. I'm retired now, so I'm basically full time doing astronomy, and it makes me very happy to do that.
That's awesome. You're staying connected and then you're sharing the love with others. So yeah, that's definitely awesome. Um, and as you mentioned, you've taken like thousands or many images now. Is there a favorite that you have?
Um, well, that's a good question. No, there are so many that I like, and it's as I say, it's a learning process. And the first time you take a picture of a galaxy, and you're thrilled that you got the picture, and
Right.
it's a little dim thing with maybe faint little arms. But as you get better, you realize, well, I could have captured more light and shown more detail, or maybe if I hadn't adjusted the mount, the way I did, the stars wouldn't be not quite circular, a little bit egg shaped. Or there's always ways to improve the data and then to improve your processing ability on the data. So I'll look back at pictures that I took 3 years ago, my first attempts at some of these objects, and now I think, wow, that's a lousy picture. Whereas a layperson might think that was a nice picture, but I can see now because I'm more educated the finer minutia. So I'm always challenging myself to do a better job at taking photographs of galaxies and nebula and planets and the sun and the moon, things like that.
That's awesome. The astrophotographer in you is trying to come out and try and do a better job. Awesome. Cool. Well, that question was put in by my wife, so I'll give her the credit for asking a good question there.
Uh,
Um, all right. So you've been sharing the love of astronomy as we've been talking about. And I'm just curious to know, are there, when you're doing these outreach events, are there any specific objects that you usually show or start
well,
with?
it depends on the season, obviously, because certain times of the year, certain constellations are visible, and sometimes they're in the daytime sky, so you can't see them at night. So, but certainly in general, the moon is very popular. People love seeing the craters and the mountains on the moon.
Right.
All the planets, people, even the ones that are the fainter ones. So obviously Jupiter and Saturn are the showcase planets. You can see the ring system on Saturn and some of the moons. And on Jupiter, you can see the cloud belts and the dance of the moon, sometimes a moon transit across the front of Jupiter, which is really cool. But even the fainter planets like Jupiter and Uranus and Neptune, even just to show people that little green dot or that little blue dot is actually a planet in our solar system, and most people have never seen it before. And to see this little field of stars with a little green dot in it, and explain when that was discovered and what the process was of discovery, people find it really interesting. Even though visually it's not that impactful, it's not as glorious as Jupiter or Saturn, but just the fact that it's a rare thing that they've never seen before, it resonates with people.
That's
And then, of
awesome.
course, there are the showcase galaxies like Andromeda Galaxy and the Whirlpool Galaxy, and then there are the showcase nebula like the Lagoon Nebula, and the Trifid Nebula, and the Eagle Nebula, and the Orion Nebula, and the Horsehead Nebula. They always look beautiful, and they show in color on the screen, which is great. But sometimes there's something which, again, is not visually that impactful, but when you explain what you're seeing, people are
Mm.
fascinated. So, for example, right now, there's a supernova in a galaxy called the NGC 3206, and that's a small galaxy in Ursa Major, just near the Big Dipper, basically the bowl of the Big Dipper. And with my telescope on Tuesday night, I pointed it at that, and you could see this little tiny galaxy, a little blurry core of the galaxy, and a couple of tiny arms. And then in one of the arms, there's a bright dot. And I can explain that that bright dot, which is as bright as the combined light of the rest of the entire galaxy, which has hundreds of billions of stars, is a star that just blew up. Now, I say just blew up. It blew up
Right.
61 million years ago. It took 61 million years for the light to get here, but
Right.
we just saw the light now. It arrived at Earth about a week ago, and now astronomers can look at it and study it. But to think that one star is as bright as the combined light of hundreds of billions of stars for a short period of time, and that we can show it to people is pretty amazing. So even things that aren't as visually beautiful sometimes when they come along are pretty cool to show, and people appreciate that.
That's awesome. And I think it also shows, or rather, you're highlighting that we think our world around here is dynamic, but we sort of forget the world outside is also dynamic. Things are changing constantly,
Sure.
and it's sort of amazing to showcase that.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
Curious to know, is there any common question that gets asked the most?
There are a couple, I guess I'd say I hear almost every night. Um, So I'll often show something and either point to it with my laser or just explain on the screen what it is and how far away it is. And then often people will say, well, how do you know how far away it is?
Hmm.
And I won't go into all that now. There's a time, but in on the Earth, we're familiar with the idea of different tools for different distances. So, for example, if you wanted to measure the length of a business card, you might use a ruler. If you wanted to measure the length of a dining room table, you might use a tape measure. If you want to know the distance from the tee to the pin in the golf course, use a laser finder, ranger. And so we have different tools we use for different distances, and astronomers have the same thing. They use different tools they use for different distances. And uh, we actually understand fairly accurately the distance to most objects within about 50,000 light years of the Earth through a process called parallax. And
Hmm.
there's a ESA satellite called the Gaia satellite that accurately measured the distance to the billion closest stars to the Earth, which is pretty amazing. And there are different methods for finding distances to galaxies and things like that. So that's one of the questions I get. And then, of course,
Yeah.
people ask about aliens. I get that a lot, which
Can you see aliens?
strictly isn't an astronomy question. And there I would give, my personal opinion, not a NASA opinion. But so just very briefly, without going into it in detail, my personal belief is that the universe is teeming with life. Life meaning, microbial, bacteriological, simple life forms, wherever the conditions are suitable, which there are a lot of places like that. I'm sure that life starts. I think intelligent life is a lot more rare, but it's probably out there too.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Makes a lot of sense. And as you mentioned, could you also talk about very briefly about the NASA Ambassador Program, as you are one of the solar system ambassadors?
Sure. So NASA's got a program for U.S. citizens called the NASA Solar System Ambassador Program, and it's run out of Jet Propulsion Labs in Pasadena. And the SSA program takes individuals who have a passion for astronomy and science, and they want to communicate that. And you're expected to do a minimum of 4 outreach events per year. I usually beat that, doing about 127.
Yeah.
And you go through, they open up applications every September. So if you look for social system or solar system ambassador on the NASA site, you'll be directed to a certain page. And I believe September 1, they open up the applications for the following year. And you must submit your application within 30 days. And then in January, they inform you whether you've been accepted into the program. You need several references, and they'll explain in the process how to do it. But basically, you don't have to be an expert. I mean, I was never formally trained in astronomy. I'm not like a PhD astronomer. I was an engineer who has a passion for astronomy and studying it for my life. So I know a lot about it, and I've been, making an effort to do public outreach and social media and astrophotography and so on, and I got approved pretty quickly.
Nice. Yep, that's good to know. And you definitely meet that criteria above and beyond. So yeah, thank you for becoming part of that.
You're welcome.
Um, Maybe switching to you were definitely doing outreach events, and now for others to also spark the love of astronomy. Um, Two use cases for you. One is for my almost 5-year-old who is definitely interested in space, mainly because I'm interested in space. So how do I keep his interest going?
Well, I think first thing I would do is take them on a trip away from the city, as I mentioned before. Find a national park or a national monument or the desert or the mountains or someplace where there's no city for 100 miles. And be sure you pick a night when there's no moon in the sky and we've got unobstructed views of the horizons. And they will be astounded at the number of stars they see and the detail in the sky. And if you have a little bit of knowledge and can point out a few of the brighter stars and how far away they are and explain that the light from that star left 1,000 years ago and just got here tonight, to me that's sort of amazing and wondrous. You can point out the constellations, the brighter constellations, and you can even point out the difference between a satellite going through the sky and a shooting star, which of
Mhm.
course is a meteor. Explain what that is, and I think a child can understand those types of concepts. And you don't need necessarily to start with binoculars or a telescope. Just the naked eye is enough, I think, to instill a sense of wonder and interest. And eventually, if the child shows continued interest in that, then you can look at getting into a simple setup with binoculars or a small telescope and take it from there.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. That it doesn't have to be an expensive hobby. It's just literally looking up and having
Mhm.
enough darkness around to actually see some
Yeah,
details.
yeah.
And I guess it probably remains, the advice is probably similar for older folks who are trying to get into astronomy. Is there would you change any of that advice?
Well, you can obviously go into a little more technical detail with adults. So one thing I do, for example, I'll point at Betelgeuse, which is the bright red star that you can't miss in Orion's shoulder. It's a red supergiant star. And I will point out that that star is expected to explode in a supernova within the next 10 to 30,000 years. So soon, astronomically speaking, maybe not soon enough for us to enjoy, but at some point soon. And when it does, it's going to create a lot of the elements that we kind of take for granted. So, for example, I point out the gold ring on my finger, my wedding ring, and I
Hmm.
say, if you're wearing gold or silver or nickel or titanium or any of those types of metals, you're literally wearing a metal which is created in the core of a star that blew up. So I'm wearing a
Right.
supernova remnant on my finger. And
Yeah.
that's where these elements above iron in the periodic table come from. They come from exploding stars. And just people think about that and say basically a star blew up in the galaxy, and then after it blew up and it spread its innards all over the place, all the elements, the calcium and the phosphorus and the gold and the silver and all the other elements that it created when it blew up. Then our star formed from a cloud of gas, and a billion years later, we had our star and the planet. So where the gold that we found in the Earth came from, we mined it, came originally from the star that blew up preceding the formation of our solar system. And to put
Right.
that in perspective is sort of amazing. People never think about things like that. So you can go into things like that in a little more detail. You can talk about the fate of our sun, which is not to blow up, but to diffuse into a planetary nebula, show them pictures of planetary nebula, and give them kind of a sense of vast scales of time and what happens in the universe. So adults are a little easier to communicate those sorts of concepts to than children are, and they are similarly in wonder about that once it's explained to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Getting them to connect to cosmos and finding their connection is definitely important. Um,
Yeah.
and the other thing I love about it is that there are enough details to get into. There's so many different things that are happening, different kinds of objects, that you almost it's difficult to run out of excitement with finding something new.
Yeah.
So that's definitely interesting. Um, yeah. Any advice for what equipment to consider for somebody starting out, in terms of
Well, it
like getting
depends.
a telescope?
Yeah, it depends on whether they want to do visual or astrophotography, and whether they're in the city or the countryside and what their budget is. It's kind of like asking, what car should I buy? I really have to
Hmm.
ask you some questions first about your level
Right.
of interest and your budget. And do you want performance or do you want cargo capacity? What are your criteria? And then you can direct them better. If I can be permitted a plug, I actually wrote, because I get this question so often, I wrote a very detailed article on my website. So if you go to www.azastroguy.com and look under Education and Outreach tab, there's an article said how to choose your first telescope, and it goes into a lot of detail, all those sorts of questions, and you can get the answer there, I think.
Awesome. Yeah, and I'll definitely link all of those, your blog and also your social media accounts. Not
Great.
that you're hard to find, you're actually very easy to find, which is which makes it all very easy. Um, cool. And talking about social media, I'm curious if you have any social media strategy. You obviously have thousands of followers, but just curious to know if there's anything that you can share there, as you think about social media.
Yeah, well, I would say you need to post interesting content, and I think you need to post regularly. So I try to post every single day. I think I do post my Astro quiz every single day. I don't always get a post, probably 95% of the time I'll post every day on other things. And you want to engage with your followers. So if someone likes your post, you say thank you. If they ask you a question, you respond right away and give detailed answers. And it's not enough just to engage with your own content. What you need to do is seek out other peers like you,
Mm.
other people who are doing astronomy education or photographs, other astrophotographers, and look at their content and appreciate when they show a nice picture or they've got an interesting news article, make a comment about that. So I think the algorithm is looking for you to engage in the broader area, not just your own site, your own social media account. They want to see that you're across the platform engaging with other people. So I think as long as your content's interesting and you post regularly and you do some engagement, that's going to attract people to your site.
Yeah, yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And you're definitely doing it right with your follower account. So that's awesome. Um, yeah, and that's why I love following your account because not only are you sharing wonderful photos, but you add details to that, and you keep your viewers informed, and I think that really helps. And with your messaging, you're definitely helping more people get connected to Cosmos. So definitely appreciate you doing that. Um,
Thank you.
yeah, absolutely. And so we'll end it here. So thank you again for what you do, and really appreciate you joining me today.
Thank you. My pleasure.